but we're going to have Justin Euteneier join us. Justin is the Director of Programs at the Epik Project, and the Epik Project is a very unique organization. They are men fighting trafficking. And if you look at the if you look at the anti-trafficking movement, it's primarily made up of women. And, to have men have their presence in this movement and to make an impact and to talk to other men and say, hey, maybe it's not cool to buy sex is incredible. So we're so lucky that the Epik Project exists. And I'd like to invite Justin up here. He's going to give us a session on demand. Welcome, Justin.
Raise your hand if you like talking with your hands. Me too, so I can't hold stuff. But I do have a couple of questions that stood out to me from the questions box. And so one of them is just a really, really honest question. It said, how do we end this if it's gone on since the beginning of time? Is it fixable? It's a really honest question. So thank you to whoever wrote that. I know that there were other questions in there. Some of them, the majority of the questions that were in there, if I'm not reading your question, it's because it's going to get answered. This one I'm reading because I can't say I can answer that. I think that that is a question for all of us to ultimately answer over time as a community. But thank you for that honest question. So good afternoon. As Robin said, my name is Justin Euteneier, and I am filled with a lot of joy and gratitude right now. Now, those might be really strange emotions for a situation where we've had such dark conversation, such weighty conversation today, but this is a room full of people who are paying attention to this issue, and that fills me with hope. So thank you for being here today. The reason that as Robin said, my title is I'm the Director of Programs at the Epik Project. I helped build a program that allowed volunteer men to get off of the sidelines and engage in the issue. But I think that the reason that I am standing here on the stage is because I, along with those guys, just decided to get into the fight. We have been experimenting and learning and growing and doing the work of demand disruption for a little over a decade. Now, before we begin, I love those movies where the beginning of the movie is the last scene of the movie, and then they spend the whole movie working up to that scene, because I love to see if I can guess how they get to that scene. So I love those kind of movies. So I like to start off my presentations that way. So here's how I want to start off. Sexual exploitation is overwhelmingly fueled by the demand from men for women's bodies. Overwhelmingly fueled by men, okay? We've been doing this for a long time, and I can count on these two hands how many times we have had women purchasers try to contact us. Also, the only way to really, truly end the demand, so this is a very quiet room. I've just noticed all of a sudden, okay, everybody just relax. We're gonna have a conversation, settle in, we're gonna relax, have a conversation. Okay, the only way to truly end the demand is to resist short-term tools that drive men further into shame. That stuff's not going to work. We have to understand the why. So when I look down, this gets louder, huh? Okay, I'll try to be aware of that. We have to understand the why, the root driving demand, both individually for the individual person and culturally. What is driving demand? So after a decade of doing this work, I can tell you that it comes down to the stories of all of us, okay? And in our context today, that means not only sex buyers, but men in general. So I would like to begin with a little bit of a story about us. All right, let's see if this works. Clickers are working. When we started off as a group of people showing up to fight, to protect girls. We'd heard about the issue. We wanted to protect people. We wanted to protect vulnerable girls. And in a minute, I'm going to show you a video of what it looks like for how we engage with buyers to set some context for that. But for right now, what I need you to know is that we showed up angry and disgusted. We were highly emotionally motivated, fist pounding on the table. We heard the stories that you've all heard today, and we just couldn't not do something. We were spurred on by quotes like, "The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to sit by and do nothing," right? That's what motivated us in the beginning, and it fueled us for a little while. But eventually, we began to develop relationships with other people in the anti-trafficking movement. Most special among those relationships was with survivors. They were the experts, and they were willing to share their insights with us. They were willing to encourage us and give us some much-needed guidance. And so, trying to honor that wisdom and that guidance, we shifted from an angry posture to a little bit more of a curious posture. Why are men buying sex? What is their story? What is the broader narrative that they're participating in? What does accountability for a sex buyer look like? And is there anything that will actually shift the needle on the demand for commercial sex? And I intermix terms like, oh shoot, I forgot to start my timer, because everybody who knows me knows I need a timer. Okay, got it. Does that mean I just got 5 extra minutes, Lauren? Yes, all right. I don't remember where I was. Thank you. Thank you. See, it's going to take a community effort. So we shifted to being curious about these guys. What will actually work? Okay? So that shift from being angry to curious, it kind of changed who we are, how we operate, and it changed the men themselves. And so speaking of those men, I get the privilege to stand here and talk with all you lovely people today, but I just want you to know that I represent hundreds of men across the United States and Canada who have gotten off of the sidelines and decide to own this issue. By all means, clap for them, please. I wish that they could be here. There are a few of them here today. Mostly sitting over here in this corner here. So Isaac, raise your hand in the bright yellow shirt. Isaac flew in from Orange County. I mean, maybe it was for work, but also he didn't have to come all the way down here. And Isaac is one of my most prolific leaders in terms of recruiting people, and he's always trying to bring me to trainings, and it just works out really well because he lives in Southern California. So now we represent I'm representing hundreds of men that have agreed to get off the sidelines and do this work. So that's a little bit about me. I'd like to know just a little bit about you. But before we jump into that, I want to just give a special thanks to Lauren and Jordan for their trust in me, for giving me the post-lunch food coma spot. I know that everybody's probably very, very full and very, very tired, so I'm going to do my best to make sure that we all get... doesn't that look so staged? But like, we've all been there. So here's what I would like to know. If this were a smaller group, we'd get some call and response, but we don't have time to do that today. So can I just get a show of hands of everybody who's here as a victim advocate, or you work with youth in some capacity? Wow, lots of you. Thank you for the work that you are doing. Show of hands for law enforcement or people within the criminal justice system. Just a few. Okay, thank you for being here. Healthcare folks. Excellent. You're a community member. Love it. I mean, you can be a community member and those other things, but like, you're here in your capacity as a community member. Legislation. Who are our policy people here? Okay, all right. You represent that entire body. All right. Awesome. And the people who would rather not say, you're welcome to just keep your hands down. And is there any group that I missed? Nonprofits. Oh, I assumed that most of those were nonprofit groups. Yeah, teachers. Oh, education. Curtis, how did you let me leave education off the list? Yeah, work with youth, education. Awesome. Well, thank you all for the work that you are doing. As we dive into demand, I want to call out two specific things, my own disclaimers. First, in a minute, I'm going to show you a video of us engaging with sex buyers. There's nothing explicit in this video. There's no imagery in this video. Oops. Apparently, this is a sensitive clicker. However, if the sound of a buyer trying to defend himself is something that might be difficult for you, I just want to encourage you to trust your gut and take care of yourself as you need. And second, based on what we just learned of who's in the room, I want to recognize that there may be a tension in the room. You see, I'm here to talk about buyers. I'm not here to defend buyers in any way, shape, or form. But I recognize that many of the people here in this room are dealing with some of the most horrific consequences of buyers' behavior. I want to understand why buyers do what they do so that I can actually create change in demand. Short-term stuff doesn't matter, and so I need to get more curious about why they do what they do. And so that's going to come out in this presentation today. And that may be a little bit of an elephant in the room of some tension of like trying to see buyers in a certain way and at the same time recognizing the incredible amount of harm that they cause. And so I would just, again, ask you to take care of yourself, but also ask that you maybe lean into that tension a little bit. That's that growth edge. Hopefully we can all do that together. Okay. So, demand, in the simplest term possible. If there were no buyers, there would be no business. There'd be nobody to sell. Now, in the anti-trafficking movement, a lot of times we like to use language that's a little bit more palatable. If any of you have ever read a book called Any Girl by Mia Doring, has anybody read that book? She's a survivor out of Ireland. I highly recommend this book. She is asking the anti-trafficking movement to call things what they are. So maybe said another way, if there was nobody paying to rape and purchase consent from women, boys, and girls, there would be nobody to sell. So we're going to get into demand. To start with, I want to provide a little bit of context of what it looks like. This video I'm going to play is the one I mentioned earlier. It's called a cyber patrol. It's a group of male volunteers coming together to speak to buyers who are responding to a decoy ad that we posted on a known prostitution site.
Average age of girls who get involved in prostitution is 13 years old.
No.
Yeah, it seems pretty young. Most of these girls are forced into trafficking by pimps who take 100% of the money. Did you know that?
No.
This business is set up to fool men into believing that they're doing something harmless, but it's actually enslaving the girls that you're trying to contact tonight. And these girls are forced into this by pimps who take 100% of the money and control them with violence and drugs.
Who said anything about prostitution?
Yeah. Well, you said you were responding to a call for Nina.
I haven't done this before. Like, somebody a few days ago was like, I look at the blog and that's how I found it. I'm not like used to this. I have girlfriend and stuff. So I'm really sorry. Like,
I just want to let you know that we talk to a lot of men, and a lot of them like to say this is their first time. And sir, I would just encourage you that when we get off this call, that you would have an honest conversation with yourself about whether or not this is your first time.
You know, a lot of guys who are in this business of calling for sex, trying to buy sex, oftentimes they have sexual addiction, and I can get you some contacts that can get you anonymous help, and I'd love to send you those links.
and you're gonna delete this number from all the tracking stuff. I promise I'm never gonna do this.
Well, I appreciate your sincerity, but I'm not going to delete the number. The number is on file, but I can tell you this. If you don't ever call one of these ads again, you won't have a problem. But if you do continue to call these ads and we intercept your phone number again, then you will go higher on the priority list, okay?
Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your cooperation and have a better night, okay? Thank you.
Okay. Take a deep breath if you need to. So we're going to get into a lot of the stuff that you just saw here. So let's jump right in, because I'm probably behind time already. I can kind of feel it. So before we get into who buyers are, I just want to do some calibration here. Most of you probably already know this. But just so it's said, and probably will need to be said again and again and again, Hollywood is not always helpful. While the attention, and Lauren kind of mentioned this earlier with the Sound of Freedom, the attention brought to the issue of trafficking is not necessarily unwelcome, but whether you're the gun-toting badass or the benevolent sex buyer who falls in love with the pretty prostitute, the problem with that narrative is not that it's wrong, it's that it's drawing the attention away from the fact that trafficking is vulnerable people and it's hidden in plain sight. It's like what Christine talked about, like being able to look out for the kids who are exhibiting signs of something's not right here. Okay, so sex buyers. Who are these guys? So first of all, this is a pie chart of 157 men that were arrested up in King County several years ago. And this is just an occupational pie chart to say, to illustrate the point that there is no such thing as a sex buyer type, an individual type of person. I'm sorry to say this to the men in the room, but it's guys that look like me and all the rest of you. They just look like us. There's nothing specifically unique about them. So that really should say common buyer motivations. Research says that there's these basic 5 types. Seeking companionship or comfort. Oftentimes we get text messages, GFE question mark. Well, usually those are like a whole paragraph of stuff like, I want to go on a long walk on the beach and da-da-da. Like, will you be my girlfriend, listen to my jokes, blah, blah, blah. They still expect sex at the end. It's still transactional. But the experience that they're looking for is more companionship or comfort. Wanting a different kind of sex, whatever their situation is, they're not able to get what they want at home. Wanting a feminine or a subservient woman is these guys that are really trying to live out some sort of misogynistic kind of way that they see the world. The dirty whore fantasy is the guys that really think of, there's 2 types of women in the world. There's dirty whores, and then there's mothers. And they just can't see anything different. And so that's how they justify the activity that they're doing. And then sex is a commodity for our exchange. And these are our guys that just send us real short text messages like QV question mark, 15-minute question mark, car date question mark, all that kind of stuff. The interesting thing to point out, though, to kind of set the stage for where we're going to go later on in my conversation, is 4 out of 5 of these are about relationships. They're about the way that men see themselves in relationship to women. So, do all men buy sex? The question that I read earlier about, it suggested this idea of like, it's been going on for so long. And you get this kind of idea that like, well, all guys do it. Turns out it's actually a little bit better of a story than you would think from a data perspective. So there's a lot of data to support that 15 to 20% of men will buy sex at least once in their lifetime. Now that's a lot of people. And, not but, and another way to look at this is 80 to 85% of men will not buy sex in their lifetime. I consider those potential allies. Also, the sex market is roughly divided up into like a 1/4, 3/4 situation. 25% of sex buyers are buying so frequently, we call them high-frequency buyers, which means 6 times or more per year, are buying so frequently that they're actually making up about 75% of the market activity. Now there's an interesting, by the way, this all comes from a research project called the Who Buys Sex report that was put out in 2019, I think, by an organization called Demand Abolition. The sample size was over 8,000 men, and it is widely regarded as a reputable source of buyer and demand research data, which is very difficult to come by. There are no exit surveys, and it is very, very difficult. So one of the interesting pieces of data in there is that 20% of guys would consider becoming sex buyers. So these are not active sex buyers, and they've never bought sex, but they might if the circumstances were right. Normally, I like the audience to do the hard work at this part, but we're too big. So I'll just tell you the number one reason that most people say they think is a circumstance that would make people feel comfortable buying, is the decriminalization and the legalization of prostitution, right? And so said more plainly, the legalization and the decriminalization of prostitution is going to send demand way up. There is some good news, right? So we're still in the same research. 60% of active high-frequency buyers, not just first-time guys, 60% of active high-frequency buyers either somewhat or strongly agree with the statement, I would like to stop buying sex. There's another question in there about why men who did stop buying sex stopped. Their number one reason for stopping was that it was no longer consistent with their morals. Right? Somebody might find out, concerned about being arrested, those are way down at the bottom. So at the end of the day, what we have is a head and a heart issue here. So we've got potentially 80 to 85% of guys who could be allies, and we have active buyers who actually do want to stop. Interestingly, though, when you look at the beliefs that they hold about themselves and about prostitution, they're just guys being guys. They're just taking care of their needs. It's mostly a victimless crime. Prostitutes are an instrument for sex. So you see this interesting juxtaposition to the narrative that they believe when they're in that mode of sex buying, the things that they justify for their own behavior, and yet this potentially more honest, more deeper side, which is I want out. I remember talking to a guy one time, he's like, man, I'd love to stop, but I've been doing this for decades, which is like, it's so frustrating because you have no right to do this once, let alone decades. And yet so many people who are addicts would tell you that they've tried everything. And so how do you stop? Which is, again, we want to get to why do people do what they're doing so that we can help them to stop. This is just a slide that shows, it's a recording of several recordings of different ways that we have engaged buyers, but just one that I want to point out is this little exchange, which is such a beautiful illustration of what we see so often when we talk to buyers. Is it working for you? Well, physically it is, but emotionally I would prefer someone that I could enjoy life with. Again, I realize that there's a tension between, I really don't give a damn what you enjoy and what you want out of life. Stop harming people. And how we stop them from harming people is paying attention to the shame that people are living with and how do we help them to get out of that. So I want to give the last word, not of my talk, in case any of you are like, oh, thank goodness he's done, of this section. I want to give the last word of who are buyers to my friend Andrea Hines. Andrea endured 7 years in the sex trade. She is an abolitionist, a writer, and a very gifted speaker. If you ever get a chance to hear her speak, she speaks about buyer motives.
Well, I'm a corrections graduate, and if you've heard me speak anywhere or read anything I've written, I think I'm a broken record in saying this, but I really think it's like my phrase of a lifetime that I just keep coming back to, and that is that we need to separate the offender from their offense. And it's very easy, like we said, to want to find a villain, want to, shame people and browbeat them, but we know that that's just not conducive to actually healing. If we assume that people are a lost cause or that they are evil by nature, given their acts, then we're really not doing them any service and we're not going to get anywhere with them. We need to come at people with a degree of accountability and understanding, because again, I think particularly people who have sold sex have seen that, men, a lot of them are not in healthy spaces when they're purchasing sex. For me personally, there was 3 basic buyers. There was the ignorant buyer that just didn't know what was going on, just kind of, oh, no harm, no foul. This place is licensed or this is legal where I live. No biggie, right? Then there would be, again, the damaged, hurt man who is, just not in a healthy space. And then the smallest group I actually found was the narcissistic men. People often think, oh, men buy sex because they just can and they want to. And there definitely is that portion of the demographic, but I really find that they are the smallest part of it. So with most of men being either ignorant or, hurt in some kind of way, what that tells me is that we need to do two things. We need to educate men and we need to heal men. And those are two things that we're really, as a society, falling very short on, in my opinion, especially the healing of men, going back to that hegemonic masculinity and that man-up mentality. But, we know, again, that when people are selling sex, it's typically due to economic circumstances, but that's not the case for when people are buying sex. There's something within them that they're missing, that they're seeking, whether that's physical intimacy, emotional intimacy. So we need to approach them, I think, in a different way than we do. And we often hear people say, well, why are we going to do, for example, a Nordic model type approach, right? Why wouldn't we criminalize women when we're criminalizing men? And we have to understand that people are typically engaging in the sex trade for different reasons. So I think that, there is a way to hold men accountable, to challenge their behavior, but to, like Jamie said, meet people where they're at and to try to just understand, why are they there? Why are they on that doorstep? Because I've learned that most men that I've at least spoken to at the John School. For example, we had one John School November 25th, 2018. Again, don't quote me, but we had about 25 men there, and every single one of them on an anonymous form said that they wanted to stop purchasing sex. So when people think that it's just like this rah-rah thing that men are doing, I try to challenge that, because I've never really seen that. Again, the small portion that are, narcissistic tendency, yes, but I didn't even find that was more than maybe 5% of buyers that were coming my way. It was ignorant men and it was hurt men. So I really think education and healing is how we can meet them where they're at, hold them accountable, but still, address the situation and the harm that they're causing.
Separate the offender from the offense. Educate and heal men. If I had been told that when I first got into this, when I was angry and disgusted, I would have had very mixed feelings about that. Because I've been taught that when a man harms a woman, you deal with him very firmly. That's not right, right? So you deal with them very, very firmly. But here we have somebody, and we've heard this from many, many survivors, you have somebody who's been so deeply hurt by men telling us that men need to be healed and educated. So, do I get to listen to my pride, or do I get to listen to the wisdom of an expert? Okay, so with a deeper understanding of who buyers are, we had to expand what disruption meant. By the way, are you hearing the little drum beats coming in? Okay. We had to expand what disruption actually means. So, when we started out disrupting transactions. But we soon realized that was not enough, right? Demand is fueled by a horrific set of cultural norms. Cultural norms that say women's bodies are here for our pleasure and nothing more. Norms that say men are simply defined by what we conquer sexually, financially, and professionally. Norms that make it so easy for sex to be commodified. Norms that need to be dismantled. This requires personal disruption, and this has been some of the most interesting work that we've done. I myself have experienced this, whether it's been my own passive acceptance or my own participation in pornography. I have contributed to the commodification of women's bodies. I am part of the problem. And we need men to be willing to be humble enough to recognize that they may have and continue to be part of the problem. I grew up in a home that was very misogynistic and classically patriarchal and all of those things. And I had to learn that I had passively accepted certain truths. And I could no longer, doing this work, I could no longer stand by what those truths were. And so expanding our model for disruption led to a pretty significant evolution in our theory of disruption. So tomorrow you're going to hear from Tom, the Epik founder, about the heart behind this evolution. But I asked his permission to give you just a little bit of a teaser. Belonging is a human need. It is not a convenient or preferential want. It is a human need. And I believe that sex buyers are experiencing a lack of belonging. I think that they're trying to leverage some sort of perceived entitlement to women's bodies to purchase some sort of cheap version of feeling belonging. Remember that little text snippet? Yeah, it works physically, but I'm still not getting what I wanted. I wanted connection with another human being. I've heard it said that trying to end the demand for sex trafficking by connecting with buyers is like fighting a forest fire with a garden hose. I totally get that sentiment. The problem is huge. Sex buyers are deplorable. The harm is so deep. I totally get it. But I'm also unwilling to sit by and do nothing because the problem is too big. I'm also unwilling to use short-term modalities and tools that are shame-based so that I can feel better about my participation in the anti-trafficking movement. I want real change, right? I'm a dad of 3 and I feel like I got an old home and I'm busy all the time. Like, I'm way too busy to be doing shit that doesn't work. Pardon my language. So belonging is that solution, right? Belonging is that solution. And interestingly enough, it has been survivors who have come alongside us who have encouraged us the most in this direction, because they say this is very similar to journeying alongside victims who are trying to get out of the life. You don't swoop in and extract them and rescue them. You journey with them for real change. So, what does it look like in practice? I'm gonna try to speed myself up here a little bit. What it looks like in practice is 2 practical ways that we engage our market disruption, what we call cyber patrols, which you saw, and law enforcement. Just really briefly unpacking cyber patrols. In our decade of doing this, we have trained hundreds of men across the US and Canada. We're currently active in 21 cities. We've conducted 1,500 patrols, 14,000 man hours, 285,000 purchase attempts, which is basically one text thread or one phone call for one of our decoys, from 145,000 unique buyers, which has all resulted in tens of thousands of conversations directly with buyers while they're in the midst of trying to purchase. What that looks like is a platform we use. We post our decoy ads on known prostitution websites. The buyers will call or text in. Their information goes through a whole sophisticated suite of software that we've developed over the years. And by the time the volunteer sees that little drumbeat on our platform, he is aware of the name of the decoy, the location of the decoy, the purchase history of this buyer, and any conversation history we've had with this buyer. They have been trained, and this is just a real a screenshot of what that platform looks like. But what I'm really happy about and most proud of is this. We train our volunteers that after every text conversation or every phone conversation to fill out this qualitative survey of that engagement with the buyer. Like I said earlier, sex buyer data is very difficult to come by. And so we are the only organization that I am aware of still. There's several organizations doing anti-trafficking, some now beginning to do demand work. I believe we are still the only organization that collects real-time qualitative data from buyers in the midst of their purchasing. And it's just a really profound set of data that we have. The tactics that we use are, as you can imagine, we try to train our volunteers to ask open-ended questions rather than make lots of statements. Don't blast these guys with your gospel of truth. Invite these guys to tell their story. One of the ways, or one of the keystones of our tactics is this sort of quadrant of accountability. We do not have legal or judicial, I guess that's saying the same thing in 2 different ways. We do not have real authority over these guys. What we have is relational capital that we try to spend. We basically say, you are not born as a sex buyer. Stop acting out of something that you are not. We are holding you accountable to being the best version of yourself, but we are unwilling to use shaming tools to do that. So we want to offer you hope. So we try to stay in that upper right quadrant of offering them a restorative opportunity. They don't all take it, right? But we are unwilling to use simply punitive measures, and we're also unwilling to offer them some sort of a watered-down kind of a hope. We train our volunteers to have a stomach for justice. You break down any narrative that they're bringing that justifies their behavior. Here's a couple of quotes. There's several quotes. I'm just going to do one from each category. This one from a buyer. I really wish I could express to you how much your one phone call changed the direction of my life. And then from a volunteer, most of the buyers I talked to started out like I did. Pornography was the common gateway. The difference between me and them was that they did not have someone to help pull them out of the hole like I had. Okay. I wish I could express to you how much your one phone call changed my life. Connection. This guy doesn't become a sex buyer because he had connection at a vulnerable moment in his life. That's what we're trying to offer these guys. Collaborating with law enforcement is the other way that we participate in market disruption. One of my favorite quotes in the anti-trafficking movement is, "We can't arrest our way out of this problem." Maybe said in victim services, maybe said another way is, "We can't rescue our way out of this problem," right? It requires something so much more of us than that. So there's a variety of different ways that we collaborate with law enforcement, but just to kind of get to the story I really want to tell, this is myself and several other volunteers speaking with the buyer after he had been arrested. They are arrested, questioned, processed, and they are free to go, and they're given the invitation to come and talk to us afterwards. They don't have to stay. The majority of them do, interestingly enough. This particular guy stayed and talked to us, but the story that I want to tell you is just a couple of months ago. We were on a sting, and Curtis, who's over at the Epik table, was with me. We talked to several guys that day, and this one particular buyer, he was so upset he couldn't even sit down, and he was pacing all over the place and looking out the window and talking about how, you know, his life was filled with so much chaos, and he's probably going to lose his fiance over this, and all, like, just doomsday kind of stuff. But he was open to talking, and he talked a lot, and he was open to a follow-up conversation with us. So we agreed we were going to talk Monday at 11 a.m. We actually asked him to put it on his calendar. Monday at 11 a.m., we called him. He drank himself stupid all weekend and woke up Monday, and he's like, I'm going to talk to these guys. I'm ready for some help. I'm ready for a new direction in my life. So he instigated, 1 week later, will you call me again? And my commitment is I will have found a group. Okay. So we called him in a week. He had, in fact, found a group. And then a few weeks after that was the John School, or it's called SBAD, Sex Buyer Accountability and Diversion, up in Portland. And he knew that we were going to be teaching at the John School. We knew that he was going to be at the John School as a recently arrested buyer. And so we connected there, and he asked our volunteer if he could take him out to lunch. He insisted on paying, and I just found out yesterday on the drive down that he's been sober since that first weekend where he drank himself stupid. And so we are trying to, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get these guys on a pathway out of what they're doing. Sure, it would feel really good in that moment while we've got this guy in a hotel room, having just been arrested, he's at this low point. Sure, it would feel great to tear into him about all the pain he's doing and how disgusting it is. But I would rather do the hard work of talking with this guy and journeying with him out of his participation in the life. This is one of my favorite quotes from the surveys that we asked buyers to participate after the John School. Program better than expected, powerful, effective, going home to take a shower and cry. Good. Good. That's how you should feel. So, beyond market disruption, we talked about cultural disruption. The demand that these guys are bringing is fueled by just really a horrific set of cultural norms, right? Prostitution that says, like, women are just readily available and they're just here for our disposable pleasure. Or cultural norms that just restrict men so horribly. Or the extremely offensive and disgusting and degrading hypersexualization of our culture that objectifies women to be like beers and burgers. So we resist that. We become a community of people who are no longer willing to tolerate it. We say no more. We partner with, and we partner with youth, right? Like the folks over there, Alex and Ashlyn from My Friends Are Not For Sale, youth who want to take on the ownership of looking out for youth, right? What do we need to be looking out for in terms of grooming? If you haven't spoken with those two young people are going to give you hope for the future. Go talk with them if you haven't. Tom, are you telling the middle school story? Several weeks ago, if there was time, Alex, I'd have you come up here and tell the story. Several weeks ago, the high school My Friends Are Not For Sale group went to a local middle school, and there are some girls that are interested in bringing that kind of content to their middle school. So we're calibrating it for middle school. We had this lunch though, but it was for the boys. Middle school boys lunch. Come and talk about My Friends Are Not For Sale. Something like 70 middle school boys came to this thing to talk about My Friends Are Not For Sale. And it's so cool to see like a high school guy paying attention to that kind of a thing and bringing other young people along with him. So go talk to Alex. Also, my friend Carl, who joined the Trafficking Hub campaign. If you're not familiar with it, it was an online digital campaign to take down the porn site Pornhub, the world's #1 pornography site, after they had been caught posting content of minors being raped for pornographic consumption content. My friend Carl joined the online social media space, just a sewer of a job, to challenge the people who were defending Pornhub, free speech and all that sort of stuff. That was how he wanted to participate in changing culture. All of this is really, really hard work. And some of it requires us guys to have our personal disruption, like I mentioned earlier. For the sake of time, I just want to read you this quote. For true culture change, the internal shift that happens within us, is just as important as the conversations we have with buyers. These are guys that are showing up originally to do the work and then realize, wow, this is as much about me as it is the sex buyer. Who am I? How am I showing up into the world? What's the lens that I see the world through? So, I'm almost going to finish on time. Oh, I got another 30 minutes? No. Oh, 4. Okay. I could do it. I want to end with what I call the do one thing. And this is not a phrase that I came up with. I am borrowing this from my 3rd grade daughter. This is my beautiful daughter, Sophie. When she was in the 3rd grade, she came home one day and told me that she was on the green team. And a project that the green team had was they filled out all these tiny little stickies of one thing that you could do to help make our planet healthy, right? I was like, oh, that's so cool. You know, what are some of the things that the kids said? And I love this one here. I will take 5-minute showers. My daughter was in the 3rd grade at the time. She's 14 now. If I could get her to take a 5-minute shower, that would be a miracle. So she's telling me about this project. That's so cool, sweetie. Like, tell me all about it. Well, Dad, and she pulls out a piece of paper. It was a contract. It was a contract for parents to fill out what is their do one thing, and you had to sign it, and she was going to turn it in. So my do one thing was I will no longer use disposable coffee cups. And anybody who knows me knows that for the last 5 years, I have been walking around with some sort of a coffee mug almost always attached to my hip. And sometimes people are like, oh, that's cool. And sometimes people just look at me like oh, you're from Portland. I can tell. But there are a few things as humbling as having to go to my daughter to say to her, sweetie, I used a disposable coffee cup. I'm really sorry. I violated our contract. That really matters to me. I'm gonna try not to do that again. So, guys, I want to talk to you for just a second. This is our issue, right? This is our issue to own. All of the victim services, arresting traffickers, all that stuff is super important. But, I mean, raise your hand if you don't want to solve this problem. If you want to keep all the nonprofits going with all the work, right? So if we actually want to solve this problem, guys, we have to own this. This is our work. This is demand work, right? This is not about trying to find the right nonprofit to rescue all the people. This is our work to do. So what I would like you to do in the next few minutes is write down something that is your do one thing. That's real. As my friend Curtis likes to say, once you've written it down, it's yours. You own it. It's your responsibility to manifest that into the world. So I would love for you to write down your do one thing. It does not have to be big and grand, right? I wish I had, I have it in my book bag over there. I have a leather journal with an event that we hosted in 2018, and it was a do one thing card, and we took time to have everybody write down their do one thing cards. And I still have mine. And there was do one thing personally and do one thing externally. My do one thing personally was I had to get my anger in check. I could not be effective in this work with the anger that I had. So that was my personal do one thing, and I've been working really hard on that so I can show up to these conversations with these guys with curiosity instead of anger, right? And then I've got my external do one thing. So please, consider your do one thing, and then I'm going to ask you to do something with it. I'm going to ask you to write down the name of somebody that you will tell your do one thing to. I'm serious. This is not like this cool conference party trick. What's your do one thing? Write down the name of who you're going to tell, and write down a date that you're going to tell them by. Because guys, we're here because we think that sex trafficking is harmful in our world and we don't want to see it anymore. It's not going to go away unless we do something about it. I don't think I have anything left. So thank you very much for your time.